Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Baby Lock, who remind you that you can support your local retailer by purchasing Baby Lock machines online. You'll find a variety of sewing, quilting, serging, and embroidery machines ready to purchase, along with notions, fabrics, and other goods and services. Visit babylock.com to find a participating retailer and see what they have ready and available for you.
Hello, welcome to Sewing with Threads, the monthly podcast by the staff of Threads magazine. I'm Threads editorial director, Sarah McFarland, and I'm joined by our senior technical editor, Carol. Hi, Carol.
Hi, Sarah. How are you?
And our special guest today is Becky Fulgoni. Hi, Becky. Welcome.
Hi.
Becky is one of our Threads digital ambassadors. So she writes exclusive tutorial content on our website. It's accessible to insiders. And Becky's been designing and sewing her own wardrobe since elementary school, where she grew past any standard ready-to-wear pant lengths. She was introduced to the wonderful world of sewing and fabric by her mom, an accomplished art quilter. Becky continued honing her craft as a costumer at the Guthrie Theater, as a sewing teacher and a design mentor. I first met you at the American Sewing Expo, where you were the Passion for Fashion Challenge design mentor. And Carol reminded me that you were a frequent multi-time winner of the Inspired by Threads Challenge when the magazine held that. So you're retired now,
Yes.
And you live and sew in Michigan, but you're going to be splitting your time with Florida. And you blog about your sewing adventures and mishaps at Trial Balloons, tballoons.blogspot.com. She loves connecting with sewing friends, a great wool jersey, and gets totally geeky about the perfect crotch curve. Well, welcome, Becky. It's so great to talk to you. And we're going to be talking about your ideas and thoughts about warm weather sewing. So, Becky, one of the first things we do when we have a new guest on the podcast is to ask 5 sewing questions.
Ooh, a quiz. Okay.
Go. Yeah. Who taught you to sew?
Well, I learned to sew at home with my mom because I was, 8 or 9 when I started sewing. And I didn't get to use the sewing machine till I was 11. And I remember that was a big milestone, is getting to actually use a sewing machine. And my mom will say that she taught me everything she knows, and then I went off and got good. And I studied, and I studied with a phenomenal seamster and designer at the Guthrie Theater, and he was brutal and everything a good mentor should be, and I think I still have there are still things that I do. Like when I get my seam ripper out, I'm like, oh, can't have a seam ripper. That was not allowed in the sewing room at the theater, and so I haven't used a seam ripper forever. And it's just things like that come back from when I was working with him.
A tough teacher can be a boon to improving your skills, definitely. You may not realize it at the time.
He was very tough.
Yeah.
Right. He was very tough, and I'm sure he made me cry. But I learned so much, and I still I credit him with most of the things that I think of as my toolkit. So,
what is your favorite fabric to sew?
Until recently, I would have said wool, hands down. I love working with any kind of wool jersey, wool, big, fat, thick wool. I love the way it molds. I love that most of the work you do is with your iron instead of with the sewing machine. So I love wool, but I will be spending winter in Key West and summer on the shores of Lake Michigan. So wool is not going to be part of my wardrobe.
It's not going to work everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah. So if I'm picking going forward, it's probably linen. So
Good choice. Yeah.
Yeah.
What is your favorite sewing term?
My favorite sewing term. Well, you mentioned it in the bio, and I have a group of ladies that get together once a month, and we've been doing it for about 12 years. And it's ostensibly a sewing group, but we call it so much therapy. Over 12 years, you get a lot of time with people in their lives, and so we've been through a lot together. But one of the things that comes up very often is the crotch curve, the dreaded crotch curve. And we spend an awful lot of time, and everybody is amazed at how different and how critical it is to getting pants to fit. And so we talk about it, and we look at it, and we try on pants, and we spend time in our underwear. So this is a big deal in our group, is the crotch curve.
Definitely. What are you currently sewing?
Well, one of the things that I've been working on this last year that completely surprises me is I've been making backpacks. And I don't know where it came from, because usually I'm much more interested in garment sewing. So this whole idea of making a backpack has been, it's been almost like a little obsession, where the pockets go and what goes in which pocket. And I wanted to have something that was a certain size, and all of the things that I want to take on a trip had to fit in certain places. And it was a whole pile of pockets.
I was going to say, did you?
Yeah. You've always been into sort of engineering of garments. And I think that backpacks are sort of just an offshoot of that, with a different set of problems that you need to design around. I'd be interested to know, are you using, what kind of fabrics? Are you using like the waxed cotton that you have been sewing jackets with?
I have used that. And the one that I really like is raincoat fabric, because I don't waterproof all the seams because there are so many, but it's lightweight. And if you do happen to spill something on it, it kind of disappears. So that one has been really, I think, useful for what I'm doing with it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think you're right, Carol, that engineering part of it, and how do I get the zipper, and which way do I want the zipper pull to go, and what length should the straps be, and where should those little things that adjust them be so that they don't stick in your armpit, and all of
That's
these
right.
different things.
And what sequence to sew the whole thing in so that everything gets tucked into a seam neatly, and it's all sturdy, and it's not going to come apart when you use it.
Right. And the pocket's still open when you're done.
Right.
Yes. I was going to ask if you had a bad backpack.
I have a whole pile of bad backpacks. I think what I have is that I've purchased backpacks. This one has this little detail that I like, and another one has another detail that I like. They don't all have everything in one place.
Exactly, yeah.
And so I was sort of picking and choosing which things I wanted my backpack to have. So, and it's so strange for me, because I don't know how many of these things I've made. They're all different. Because I want to try this and I want to do something else. And they take, I don't know, 6 to 8 hours to make one of these things. And so it's like a whole day retreat to go and do this. And I think that's part of it too, because I really get lost in time when I'm doing it. And
well, I hope you'll consider writing a blog for the insiders about backpacks. And, seriously, what problems you've had to solve, and hardware choices that you think are good or bad.
Hardware is so fun.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the best. Yeah.
People would like to know that.
I've spent time in hardware stores. When I was in London the last time, I found a marine hardware place. They had hardware for boats. Like, oh, this is great. I can hook all kinds of things together.
Okay, our last sewing question is, what do you love most about sewing?
For me, it's almost a meditative thing often. And so it's sort of that place that I can go that I feel competent and I feel calm and I feel like I can handle it. So when all kinds of other things are going on that I can't handle or I don't want to handle, I can go and sew, and it reminds me that, yeah, you're good at this, and get a grip. And so it's kind of, I love the community. I love the connection with people who enjoy what I do. But so much of the time is spent by yourself when you sew. And for me, it's really important time.
Okay, Becky, when we were talking about what to talk about on this episode, you mentioned this lifestyle change, that you're going to have more time in Key West, and your posts for Insider are always very creative. I mean, you look at home deck fabrics, you've looked at sourcing different materials from home deck items, and we started talking about what you were thinking about making and doing when you got to Key West. And you filled me in a little bit about the atmosphere there and how is it different from Michigan?
Yeah, it is. It's different than any place I've ever been. And I think that's why both my husband and I were really excited about it. And we've been visiting for, I think this was the 4th year that we spent the month of January there. And it's a strange mix of things. There's a huge military establishment there. There's the little White House, which is still used by, I guess, any of the administration and president can use the little White House. So you've got that element there. You've got cruise ships that come in 2 or 3 a day. You've got parrot heads, which are the Jimmy Buffett, grass skirts and coconuts, and you've got the artist community and the gay community and the retirees and bikes and 6-toed cats and chickens everywhere. It's just this mishmash that if you put it together anywhere else, I think it would implode. It couldn't survive with all of that going on. But somehow it works in Key West. And I think for me, there's a level of tolerance that's demonstrated just across the boards, because you're living in such a tight space. You figure it out. And that's really special to me. And so when you're out and about, everybody's making it work. And so it's a very different atmosphere in a different place.
Now, what kind of things do you usually sew, and how is Key West going to change what you might typically sew?
Well, I mentioned that wool thing.
Yeah.
That's probably not going to be on the sewing machine much. The color palette that I've been working with and love, I call mud colors, and that's pretty much, browns and grays and dark greens and kind of fall rich colors. Yeah. And when I've been in Key West and I have my clothes that I take with me, I just feel like I'm like, oh yeah, she's from Michigan. Yeah. You can tell. Look at, everything's gray, everything's brown. And in a place where you paint your house turquoise and yellow and pink and coral, and I think is it in the Inuit language that they have like 45 100 names for snow or something.
Something like that.
Yeah. In Key West, they must have the same number of colors of blue. I mean, aquas and turquoise and teals, and everything is oceany colors. And that's very different for me.
I have to say, I've only been to Key West once, and it was probably almost 30 years ago. And I remember that I was wearing khaki colored shorts and a black top.
Oops.
And I walked around feeling so drab. And then I found a store that specialized in Sea Island cotton. And I went inside, and it was just, as you say, it was just flamingo and, Caribbean and sunshine and everything with all these pretty prints. And it was so nice. And of course, Sea Island cotton is fantastic anyway. Yeah. I actually don't think I bought anything and brought it home. I don't think I was doing a lot of sewing at the time, even though why was I in that store? I think I just have always gravitated toward a fabric store.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even though I didn't actively sew at that point, I think I still was just like drawn to it. And I walked in and thought, oh, this is so beautiful. I did have the sense to understand that if I were to buy that fabric, I would take it home and look at it and be like, oh my God, how can I wear this? At the time I worked in New York City, I knew that it just, like a frothy aqua blue blouse was just not part of my world at the time.
Well, the same feeling that you had wearing black and khaki in Key West.
Right. Yeah.
You wear turquoise in New York City, and it's, breach of protocol.
It's going to be so much fun for you, I think, to do that. Now, do you have a sewing machine in both places? Will you do that, or will you take one back and forth with you?
I will have sewing machines in both places. Yeah.
Yay!
Because Threads provided me with one.
Was that one of your prizes at one point?
Yes.
Oh, was it? Can I ask? Was it a baby lock?
I have. Yes, I have a baby lock. And I just a couple years ago got a Janome.
Yeah, I feel as though those were sponsors that we've had for the fashion shows in the olden days when we used to run those at Novi. Yeah.
Yep. So I have machines available.
Fantastic.
Do you have any particular garments or like a mini wardrobe in mind already, or have you been thinking about that?
Well, having spent a few Januaries there, I have some ideas about when I'm there, what I wear. And one of the things that I realized was we don't have a car when we're there. Mm. We just have bikes. And so whatever it is has to go on a bike. So probably not a lot of long skirts or, full pants.
Or short skirts for that matter.
I have some Eddie Bauer skirt things that work great on a bike. And those probably will be the bottom half of the program most of the time.
Oh, but the backpack will be great too.
Oh, yes.
When you get the perfected backpack. Yeah.
Because everything, even things like going to the grocery store on a bike, that's a whole different thing. You get just what you need for whatever time period. And so lots of things are different when we're there than when we're in Michigan. So how we shop, how we get around. I realized after the first time we were there, my husband picked me up at the airport in Kalamazoo. And as we were going home, I'm like, slow down. And I realized I hadn't gone more than the speed of my bike or my feet for a month. And
it felt
going at highway speed was making me very nervous. And so the difference is quite pronounced. And so lots of things, it will be fun to have two very different, even though I won't have different seasons, I'll have two very different experiences.
Do they have good fabric stores in Key West, or have you found a place?
Well, my husband will laugh about this. When we were looking at houses, we looked around at a lot of different things, and the one that we ended up with literally is at the other end of the street from the only fabric store on Key West. And my husband said, "Now, did you know that?" It's like, no, actually, it's just how my life works.
That's right. That's kismet.
That's right.
And what kind of fabrics are you looking at? Are you thinking you'll get things there? Are you looking online?
Well, I've kind of got two things in my head. One, there's a woman that I saw quite often. She must have lived in the same area, but I saw her walking around quite often when I was there in January. And she always looked so cool and put together and chic. And she mostly was in white and natural kind of linen-y feeling things. And she just made me sigh when I would see her. Oh. And so that's one thought. And the other one, all of the prints and the colors and the combination of colors that you just can't do in Michigan. And that sounds like a lot of fun too, but I'm a little nervous about the clown pants thing. So I'm going to have to be a little careful with all of that color and figure out, because it's not something that I've worked a lot with. And so it'll be fun to experiment, but when you're experimenting, sometimes things go very wrong.
Yes.
And so we could have some disasters.
It's funny. We were talking to you a little bit the other day about that whole process of sort of testing and experimenting and doing what another author that I've worked with in the past calls getting to yes, where you are willing to just try a lot and throw it away if it's no good, or try to fix it and turn it into something that you like. And it sounds like you're going to have a really interesting time getting to yes with this new wardrobe. Yeah.
And I think that also the weight and the feel of the clothing is different, because you want things where not very much touches anything.
Yeah, not that clingy sense.
Yeah. So the actual shapes of the garments and the patterns that I'll choose, I think will be fun to experiment with as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, I was just talking with a friend about this the other day, that I haven't made as much for myself lately. Yeah. And when I do, I feel that I have to really, really plan something that's going to fit in with the rest of my wardrobe. It's like I don't have the time to experiment and have fun as much. And sometimes, even though those are probably the clothes that I need, they're not the clothes that I want. And I was wondering if you ever just see a fabric and you're like, I have to have it. I can see the garment, but it doesn't
make any sense.
Yeah.
Well, I did something a couple years ago. Well, when I retired, and I've been retired for 4 years now. Wow. Okay. Lose track of time. But I realized that there were a lot of things in my fabric stash that were never going to be made into what they were planned, work clothes. And so I went through, I did spent a week or something just piling through and making this stuff goes out and this stuff maybe. So I just had this whole system of categories of what stayed and what went. And I had things that were destined to leave the house in a basket, and I stuck it under my sewing table until I could take it wherever it was going to go. And I realized, I realized once I had made the decision that it was no longer part of my life, all of a sudden the preciousness of it disappeared. Those pieces that you have that you say, oh, I don't want to cut this because I want it to be really special and I want it to be perfect. And they sit there because you can't do that. And so this basket of stuff all of a sudden was like free. It was free of the encumberment of preciousness. It was free because it had been amortized any number of years. And so all of a sudden I would have an idea about something and say, oh, I bet you I could use that. And I'd get something out of this basket. And I don't think anything ever left the house. It just got turned into stuff that was fun to make, that was different than I would have ever done with it before. And it was free and unencumbered with whatever emotion I had given it before. And it was so much fun. And I decided that needed to be part of my program, is I had to sort through and get rid of the stuff and put it in a basket. And so all of a sudden then it could be whatever it wanted to be. And I got to make those garments that wouldn't necessarily fit with what I was doing or wearing at the time. And it's a lot of fun.
I was going to say, it feels really good.
Yeah.
Well, you were talking about what you enjoy about sewing. And I think the feeling of competency, of making progress, a long time ago, I realized that I think a lot of my hobbies and the things that I like are in the direction of order. So taking something like yardage and making it into something that I feel is more useful for me.
I kind of get that. And I think that's probably why I don't really care about cooking all that much, because you take a bunch of stuff and you turn it into also something that you can still eat, and then it's gone. And it just seems like not really worthwhile.
That's sort of my feeling about quilting. I love quilts, and my mom is an exquisite quilter, and I love seeing them and the art of them. But for me, why would you cut up a perfectly good piece of fabric and then put it back together?
Well, and then just lay it somewhere flat and see it like once a day. I know. You kind of want to wrap yourself in stuff. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, 3D has more appeal for me.
Yeah. I do have to say that during this period of time when I have been making masks, sort of every weekend, I put a couple hours in to make some masks and send them to people. It's been a great way to go through my stash and turn weird cotton prints that I've bought thinking, oh, that'll be a cute blouse. And then afterwards I would think, I will never wear that fabric at all. But I could, but it would make a very fun mask for somebody. So it feels like the potential has been realized in a totally different way from what I thought. It's, reducing the stash a little bit, and feels good to do that. But your whole basket of, this had, first it was pressure and now it is potential to be realized without that pressure, is something we can all probably learn from.
Yeah. And the mask making has been interesting for me. I had my son is very tall. Both of them are, imagine that. And I make T-shirts for one of my sons because he wants them a certain length, and of course can't find them. And he's all about soft fabric. So whenever I find really soft cotton, I'll get it to make T-shirts. But I like to put goofy pockets on them because he always wants a pocket. And so I had found, it must have been during October sometime, but I found this little cotton print with skeletons all over it. And I thought, oh, that'll be a great pocket on one of his shirts. And I probably did put one on. And when I was going through to pick out mask fabric, I went, oh, maybe not. Walk away from the skeleton fabric. So even in that context, there were things that would work and things that wouldn't work.
That's true. I actually made a mask out of this really great fabric. This was another Robert Kaufman's sample that came into the office, black with flames on it.
Ooh.
Like a photographic fire. And that I made to send to my son. And, when he received it, he doesn't practically ever call. But when we talked on the phone, he said, well, somebody else had given me a mask and I got one from the lab, but that one, the flame one, is cooler. I suggested he spend the rest of his time in isolation painting flames on his bike and his bike helmet so that he can be what
so
did
they
he
coordinate.
Yeah, I think so. But we're getting far away from fabrics, usage. Becky, you recently posted a really good blog post about using bias binder foot, which is something that you started using to make the masks, to put the ties on the mask. But you also had some really interesting ways of using it for garment construction. That is really fun. I'm thinking about ordering that foot for my machine because it seems like such a cool way to finish a garment, make it reversible, have a neat trim on it. What have you been making with that?
Well, when I got the foot, I thought, well, this makes sense for people who quilt and do a lot of binding but it's a really fun foot. And I would put binding on things even if I didn't have to, okay, like bind. And I don't remember when it occurred to me, but I realized that if you stick two pieces of fabric in at the same time, it becomes a seam as opposed to just a bound edge.
Right. Yeah.
And well, I can make this work. And so this is the I don't know if we can see this all that well, but
I can see it. Oh, I love it.
But you can see the fabric started out as a scarf that I had gotten at a museum store somewhere, and it's got a lot of body to it. And so when I would wear it, it would sort of take over my face. And so I didn't choose it very often. But I love the fabric. It's 2 layers of sari material, silk sari, that's been sort of boro stitched together, if you can see it.
Yeah.
And one edge had this really cool little ducks and faces on it.
That's
kind of a little border. And I decided it wasn't really getting worn as a scarf, so I wanted to do something else with it. So the edges are all bound with a washed silk dupioni, which goes through the bias binder really well. And so some of the pieces are actually pieced. So that's the shoulder seam. And that's the 2 layers
all bound,
going into the binder together.
Wow.
And then the edges are finished just with the binding. And when I get to an edge that isn't covered up, I tie a knot.
I was going to ask, how do you finish those pieces where there's
That's
always
some
edge that you fall off the end of because you can't enclose everything.
Yeah. So the places that happens get a little knot. And this is actually reversible. So
you can see both sides of the beautiful print.
That's wonderful. I love it.
Yeah.
Becky, had you ever done a treatment like this without the foot?
I've used binding as a trim in different ways. And I still do. It depends on the width that I want. My binding foot makes this width, which is about 3/8. And so if I want something wider or I want a really tiny something, then I wouldn't use it. But for me, this is, again, that engineering thing. Figuring out which seams get which things and how can I fit it all together. And so the problem solving about it and how to make it work with the binding foot is the fun part for me.
Yeah. I was curious about how much time it saved you. And
it's amazing how, because you're not cutting out it's literally 3 pieces, the back and the 2 fronts, no facings, everything is just very simple.
Yeah. And then once you've applied that binding, all of a sudden it's done.
Exactly.
You don't
no
have to go back and
hemming,
I've got to deal with those seam allowances now. Yeah.
Yep. It's all done. And it's the having the finishing, deciding which side gets the binding and which side gets the seam
Mm-hmm.
is another. And sometimes you can do both. So you get the trim on both sides. So it's a lot of fun.
Well,
You should get yourself one of those.
Yeah, you are very good at figuring out ways to make things reversible. We should
I
put
love to
a
do
note
that.
in the show notes about your article on making reversible garments, because it's very eye-opening. And even if you don't want your thing to be reversible, the finishes are really great for regular clothes anyhow.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, we got a lot of wonderful feedback on that article.
yeah.
Becky, your work, when we receive it for stories and even just seeing it here, is always so accurate. It always looks beautifully finished.
Oh,
Sure
thank
does.
you.
And your stitching looks, very precise and even. Are you kind of a slow sewer? I know from talking to you that you are not a perfectionist.
No,
and
no.
and that you don't kind of ascribe to a level of perfectionism that sort of holds you back creatively. You want to talk about your philosophy? Yeah.
Well, when I worked at the theater, I had to the mentor that I mentioned was very fast and very good. And basically the expectation was you keep up. And so I got very fast, very quickly because I wanted to keep going. But that experience, I can sew very, 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 very quickly. But I don't. And when I was working and having a family and all of that stuff at the same time, soccer at this time and the school play and the work conference and all that stuff, you guys know all that. And so I was sewing in these little half-hour chunks, or I'm going to go put that hem in. And so being fast at that point was really great, because obviously if you're trying to fit a lot of stuff into a little amount of time. Since I've retired, it's been a whole different idea about how and how much time. And I don't need any clothing whatsoever. I can survive on the clothing that I have right now. It's what I like to do. Mm-hmm. So spending more time and savoring the experience a little more has been really a pleasure, and not trying to fit it all into a 2-day weekend. So I've kind of changed at least the speed. And the other thing that I found is, the old saying, "Oh, you got to sleep on it." Mm-hmm. Well, before, if you're trying to fit it into a certain amount of time, I would get to a point and say, "Oh, what do I need to do here? Is this going to cover this, or is this whatever the issue was?" And I'd charge through it, and then I'd end up taking it out. Mm-hmm. And I found now that when I get to those points and I just put it down, the next day, it's like, wow, why didn't I realize this when I put it down last night? And I think it's the sleep on it thing. I think my brain takes it and figures it out. And then when I come back to it, it's there. It's like, oh, well, that makes all the sense. Why didn't I think of it before? Yeah. So that idea of savoring and sleeping on it and having the luxury of time has been really a different way of sewing for me, and I like it.
Yeah, I think you're very into doing a lot of testing of each little technique before, so that by the time you get back to the garment, you know what you're doing and you know it's right. But Sarah, I don't know about you. I feel like, I've got the skirt kind of put together and it needs a waistband. Bam, I'm putting this waistband on and let's see how it works out. This is something that I just did. I decided to replace this waistband with a wide strip of elastic as a facing. And, you do this and the fabric was rotten, lousy, unstable, coarsely woven. And I knew that once I got it on there, I was not going to want to take it off. So it had to be kind of like right the first time. And I thought, okay, just be courageous and dive in and do it, because, I don't feel like I have time to mess around with these things anymore. And that is very hard for me, because that's not temperamentally who I am. I like to try things and make sure I'm going to do it right the first time. That's also probably why I don't like to cook, because if you can't go backwards in cooking, you can't whip out a steam.
Yeah, I should take that salt out, maybe.
I know.
Well, Becky, our time has come to an end. It's been so wonderful talking to you. You're very inspiring. I get a lot of creative ideas from you. And we have a wonderful story from you coming up in our August-September issue. So thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's been really fun.
Oh, it's always fun to talk to you, Becky.
Thank you for listening. Follow Threads on social media and visit threadsmagazine.com to view show notes for this episode. While you're on the site, check out Threads Insider, our online membership with exclusive access to expert sewing techniques. Until next time, keep on sewing with Threads.